Hello guys, in this video I'm just gonna create a very simple web API that we can use to demonstrate the Visual Studio Online DevOps capabilities. So Visual Studio Online is a free service that allows you to store your source code, run builds, run tests, and create deployment. So the free service is limited, but you can pay for more features. So first, we will just create a very simple web API using .NET New. So now it is just creating the web API, and then let's say .NET Run. This will test if our web API indeed works. So to test the web API, the source code is designed to return some values when you go to localhost 5000/API/values. So if you see these two values, then it means you're good. So let's just stop this for a second using Control C, and then I'm gonna initialize this as a Git repository using the command git init. This basically means that all of the folder that I'm currently in now is a Git repository. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna add all the files as a first commit. So it's now, if I go to git status, all of the files are in new file mode. And then I'm gonna say git commit -m, and -m is just basically saying here's a comment for that commit. And you can put anything behind these double quotes, but I'm just gonna follow a very simple, uh, let's say, pattern that Angular team at Google uses. So they name it some verb and then the name of the project and then colon and the actual comment that you have. So my comment is that this is the initial commit of code. So now I have saved all of my work initially. So all this work are not written by me but was created by the boilerplate that the .NET New above here command ran. So this would be the .NET New web API, and then that command basically created all this code, and basically it's just a template, and as we've run earlier, it works. So this is it. We have now committed our work. Going back to Visual Studio Online, you can go to the code part of your of the UI, and then just copy this link. And but first of all, you want to generate Git credentials. So in my case, this is my email address. So we have an alias that is optional. So let's say we have an alias that's Neil Michael Azure. I'm gonna use this alias. Oh, it doesn't accept. So this is probably good enough. And then I'll use a new password. So I have now successfully saved this one. I'm just gonna copy this URL and say git remote add origin and paste that URL there. I'm saying for all the remote mirrors of this repository that is in my local system, the origin one, the remote mirror named origin is gonna link to this actual specific Git link. So as you note, we're using HTTPS here. There is another way using SSL, but I'm not gonna discuss that right now, using SSH, but I'm not gonna discuss that right now. Next is we're gonna git push origin master. So what this is saying is that I'm gonna push all of my committed code to the origin. The origin is this link, and the master is my current branch. And I'm gonna push what's inside master to the origin. Now it will ask the username and then the password. Let me retry. I mistyped my password. Hmm. One, the hard part. Let's recheck the, let's say I'm just gonna retype my password. Save Git credentials. Okay. So let me push again. There, it now works. So basically, if I refresh this part here, it now builds everything. So as the page has changed, it now shows the content of the source code that I submitted earlier using this git push origin command. The next thing I will do is create a build and release cycle. But first, I'm just gonna focus on the build part. I want the system to make a build every time I push or change the source code. So I'm just gonna choose ASP.NET Core since we're working with ASP.NET. And then, yeah, let's leave that to default. And here we actually have a hosted one, and this is good enough. I'll leave that as default. Save. Then let's queue. What this does is it actually just creates a build schedule wherein it looks for any project that is named .csproj and projects within tests also and runs them. So I queued this one earlier. We should be able to see this inside the queue. So now it's currently initializing the agent. So what is an agent? Basically, an agent is a software installed on a computer that Microsoft provides for free to anyone using Visual Studio Team system. So there is a software there called the agent, which basically receives your source code coming from VSTS Git repository. So it downloads the source code and then runs the build. If it finds the appropriate files that it was defined for. In this case, these appropriate files we are referring to is the chproj. If I edit this, it's referring to the csproj. So basically, right now it has initialized and then it also has finished downloading the source code and then it's now restoring the .NET project. The restore operation for a .NET project is required so that it downloads all the NuGet packages for that specific csproj because a certain csproj may have a lot of dependencies. So here we are encountering some issues. Let's see. Let's investigate what's happening. First, .NET Core is version 1.02 and then the .NET version that I'm using here is 2.0. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna edit this build definition and change the version of .NET Core that we are going to use. So we go, and also in the publish artifact, I'm just gonna remove. One is test, right? Command is test, publish. I'm gonna remove these steps actually and retain test. Actually, we don't have a test yet, so let's remove this. And we only restore then build. So, save and queue. Basically, what we're saying here is that the hosted means that we're using the one provided by Microsoft for free. You can buy more using uh, Microsoft Azure, and yeah, and we're saying the branch is master. So now we have queued this second task. You can see here in all definitions, if I click from here, our first recently completed task has failed. That's because it was using a different version of .NET Core. Now we have updated the version of .NET Core in our settings for the build definition, and we are rerunning it. So if I click this run schedule, so it has just finished initializing the agent. Now it's downloading the source code and it's doing a .NET restore. As you can see here, the version of .NET Core is 2.15. Seems our modification worked. I will be fast forwarding this part of the video so that we don't have to wait for the actual build. So now the build still failed. It is saying the packages failed to restore. Not actually sure what this means, but let's investigate further. So file type was not recognized on this one. ls, so simple web.csproj. It doesn't recognize the file type. Let's go back here and modify this once again. Let's see where we have made a mistake. I think that's good enough. It downloads from play name restore. Correct. What I actually can do is actually name this using the directly by referring to it. Path to projects. So say and use packages from magit.org. Yep. And we queue everything just to make sure we're doing the right thing. I'm just gonna set a .NET restore so it works on our local machine. So let's try again another time. So as you can see here, you can see two bars. Both are red, that means two failed attempts previously, and this gray bar here is our current attempt. What's important here is that I am showing you the process of investigating the build. So basically our problem is that the system builds on our local machine. I'm using a Mac, but somehow it doesn't work when it hits the host machine that Microsoft provides for us. Maybe there is a difference in the version. That's number one. Number two, I'm thinking maybe we'll have to use Linux, for example. But yeah, I'm gonna check on that. We'll probably gonna change our default host to Linux. But if you're using Windows and you're building for Visual Studio Team System, you should select VS 2017 for the host, and it should be there. So in this case, I will now change the host to a Linux host. Um, View, and then I'm gonna select a Linux preview there. Going to be our fourth attempt, but this time using a Linux machine. Well, it does sound it works, so the build went out successfully. So in this case, we have now known that that particular host that we selected is not compatible what we have within our source code. So it also helps that you know what actual host type will work with your project. As you can see here, we have everything succeeded for just to 32 seconds. And yeah, let's see the builds. You can see here for this particular build, our build history shows us that we have three failures, and in the fourth time we succeeded. We now change the trigger for the build. So earlier we just set up a manual trigger. What we want now is that every time we push, we trigger a build. So I'm just gonna edit this build, and I'm gonna go to triggers and enable continuous integration. I'm just gonna click batch changes while build is in progress. I'll explain that later. And then only work with the master branch. And I'm gonna save and no, I'm just gonna save. Oh, what happened? So I think it's saved. It should have saved. So now that this is saved, we have enabled this trigger and refresh this page to know if this actually saved. Go back to triggers. Indeed, it's saved. So what's happening here is that every time I push new code to the repository, the Visual Studio Team System will automatically run a build. Let's try that. First, we'll have to modify the code that we have. I'm gonna use Visual Studio Code for that. So I'm just gonna clear this out and make sure we're on the simple web project, and I'm just gonna write code dot. So in your machine, you may have different commands, or you may want to use Visual Studio to open stuff. But yep, I'm just gonna click on the controllers values controller. And here, I'm just gonna change this to, for example, uh, another value and value. So if I run this in .NET Run, my expectation is that here, this should change. Another value and value. So we have technically changed our code. Let's say we're satisfied with that change. I'm gonna add all changes. It's just informing me that all occurrences of CRLF will be replaced by LF. Basically, CRLF is how Windows does things when you press enter, and it's LF in Unix, and I think it's CR on Mac by default. So let's hit status to see what files were changed and what files were added. Here, we now know that bin debug has been added. So we'll just unstage some files here, then git reset head, and then the file to unstage. So I'm gonna unstage everything on bin and object. So if I'm gonna see git status again, it says that bin and object folders were modified but unstaged, meaning if we commit, they don't get to be included in that commit. I also want to unstage the .vs code part, so I'm just gonna git reset head .vs code. Let's see, git status. So VS Code is also now on stage. And we are only going to commit the code within controllers values controller.cs because that's what we intentionally changed in the file. So I'm just gonna say git commit, and I'm just gonna change my notes here. Instead of a core, let's say this is a new feature in our web API, and I'm just gonna comment here, change the values of the API. And let's see, from git log, we now have two commits, whereby the first commit is now at origin master, but the most recent commit is only on head, but also in master branch, but within locally. I'm gonna press Q to exit from that, and now I'm just gonna push that change. Now it has sent this change to the GitHub, to the Git repository that we have. And here's the thing: if you click on builds, it should automatically detect that we have sent in new code, and now it is in progress for build number 2017-106.1006.5. It now automatically is in progress. That means it has detected our push and it is now building our code automatically. And if this does pass, we get a notification similar to this that it succeeded. So let's wait for that to finish. I'm just gonna talk about parallelism for a second. So if you have 100 people working on one project, committing and pushing code, then it might help if you have different hosts. Right now we're using hosted agent Linux. Let me verify if it's using Linux by default. Options. Let's find out where that should be defined. Should be using Linux. It should be somewhere here. The settings for that. I can't find it. Anyway, we're not using Linux, so I'm just gonna save this using Linux. And I'm expecting that build to fail. The one that is in progress just recently, yeah, it failed because it was not using Linux. Earlier, we just forced it to use Linux, Now the default queue is hosted Linux preview. By the way, it's preview because it's not yet final. So usually Microsoft releases host just for a testing purpose. Later on, I'm going to show you how to use your own machine as an agent so that you can use your own machine here and not the one provided by Microsoft. But yeah, right now what I'm going to do is just queue a new build, and by default is now hosted Linux preview, and queue that. This is now in progress. So let's just clear this up, and I'm just gonna put some ignore files. So let's open the uh, open our project folder. That should be simple web. And then I'm just gonna add this all to an ignore file. Git ignore. That basically means we don't want to include files in here to the Git repository so that they don't get saved. Object and bin. Save that, and then from here I'm gonna add the git ignore file. Name this core. Basically, this is the feature wherein you can commit code directly from within Visual Studio Code. There are similar feature in a Visual Studio. And I'm gonna push that push to region. Okay. You can see here, build number 6 was the build that I manually triggered. Build 7 is the reaction when I pushed using this application. So that's what we see here now. What's this? One is Visual Code. Oh, I see. This is like another version of Visual Studio Code, like a preview version. Yep. So build number 7 succeeded. So now we're expecting if our build has no issues, we should not be experiencing any failures. But I want to change the setup a bit. It's gonna hit no, rm this rf bin and object hit status, and then hit rm object dash r status. Gonna commit this part, and I'm gonna say bin files origin. And if you observe here, I pushed again, it will also now build once again. But we were only deleting bin files with that one. So that should be of no concern. This should still pass because bin files are produced on every build. So let's get back to our code. And now what I want to do is I want to restructure our project. Most projects in Visual Studio, if you use the Visual Studio for Windows, it's set up with a solution and then a folder similar to the name with the solution, and within it are the CS proj. But in most recent times, the structure has changed, the trend. This is basically just based on trend. There is no actual standard that guides this. So I'm gonna create a source directory. So if I'm gonna show all files, we now have a source directory which is empty. And I'm gonna move everything there. Let's say controllers, program.ca. Let's move controllers to source. And I'm also gonna move all.cs files to source and move all.json files to source and move the .cs proj files source and move wroot source. So we now have only the source, and if I go within the source, I see everything else. We have moved everything there. So I'm just gonna clear this and close this version of code and this one. So now within the source project, since we changed the location, we're gonna try the build if it still works. And .NET build. So it's good, it still works. And let's git log, git status. Great. So I'm just gonna add everything and git add you also to make sure all deleted files were actually deleted and added files are actually added. And then git commit -m, and let's say refactored directory structure. And as you can see here, it should, oh, I forgot to git push. After pushing, then we should be seeing another in progress here. But this will likely fail. Why? Because we have hard-coded the path of the CS proj for restore. So I'm just gonna use this path for restore. This basically means find all CS proj and restore them. So I'm just gonna save and queue, and probably I'm just gonna cancel the previous queue. Should now have, yeah, it failed. This one failed, and then 10 should succeed because we have changed the directory. Now what we're gonna do is let's create another folder test, and within that, let's, yeah, we're correct. We are in project simple web test. So if we check out here in Visual Studio Code, we have a new folder named test, and within test, let's create a new project, which is, if we expand this one, we see that there is an XUnit project template here. We'll be using that one. So let's try make .NET new XUnit, and let's name this .NET new XUnit simple web test. It doesn't want something that underscore simple web. Yeah, let's .NET new X. Okay, let's just remove that and use it plainly. So we now have a test project, and within test, I'm just gonna add a simple fact here, and then the fact is that assert um, let's assert that no, let's look at XUnit quickly for the documentation. I forgot. So, okay, here we go. Let's use this. And then we will try to assert that indeed 4 is equal to 4. And then I'll just try to do a .NET restore here. Where should we? .NET store within the test directory and .NET test. Okay, it was able to run this test successfully. But if I'm just gonna assert here that 4 is equal to 6, this test should fail. Yep, it failed. And then the failure is caused by this information here. Let's say we'll stick to 4. Okay, that should be good enough. We'll do this. And then we add all of this code. Git add all of this code. See the status. We have 2 new files. I will actually want to rename this name symbol to yeah, let's leave it at that for now. Here, git commit, and I'm just gonna say here test for the web API initial sample test, and let's say we push this git push origin. So now we're pushing the code back here. It's in progress once again. So this thing should just eventually pass. It's taking time to restore some stuff. Finished restoring, it's now building. The more projects you add, the more time restore actually the restore operation takes up. But this is only because we're using a host provided by Microsoft. If you're using your own host and you have pre-cached all of these dependencies, nugget dependencies, then it is actually much faster. But what's important is now that we have passed. So this build is good. Now we will edit the build definition and we add another step here to test. So let's add that step and then going to run test for .NET Core 2 and not a test, but let's click test .NET test. Let's rename this to test. So the command was .NET test, but you have to run that command within the test folder plural and run the command .NET test for this to work. So the the path to the project is, let's copy this path here, test, then within test we have many CS proj, and then just run all of the CS proj within that folder. So we now save and queue this, and make sure it's running on hosted Linux. Let's observe if this will work or not. So we are now past the restore phase and we are in the build phase. The build now at this point will build two projects. That would be the actual project and the test project. And we have also finished the test part. What we're going to do next is we're going to insert an issue that will deliberately fail the test. So, and then I'm just gonna say here that let's say we thought we had a fix that would fix this problem, and then this should fix it. But in hindsight, this would actually break the code because we have initially made a very false statement here that 4 is equal to 6. So I'm just gonna uh, and let me see. So I'm just gonna go push this code. Oh, wait a minute. I need to commit. I'll use the command line for now. I got confused. And then I'm gonna meet. That's why I don't really like working with the UI because sometimes I get really confused. Now I'm gonna push this code and we are expecting that there is a new build here which should fail because the test is doing something crazy. And then from the logs, we should be able to at least see what went wrong to a certain degree, but you can't expect everything to be there. Um, the best thing to do is actually run local test .NET test, then obviously this would fail because we're running the test within our local machine and we're quite sure we have an issue. So I think something similar to this should be visible in our logs here on the website. So we are now past restore page and we're doing build phase. After the build phase, I think the build should succeed because there's really nothing wrong with our code. It's just that the test is wrong. Let's see. At this point, the test failed. Let's see why. Uh, Matching specified pattern. This is a huge issue because it should fail. This means that there is something wrong with our path. Let's see. This one should actually be plural. Good thing we were watching for it. So I made this plural because you can see here that's plural tests. Let's modify the code a bit and push again. So 7. So this is something that should still fail. And let's say we meet part 2 and then push. So those are one of the gotchas that you really need to observe because things that should fail should really fail. And then since it passed, there was something wrong with our configuration. In this case, we misspelled something. So it didn't find any projects that were related to tests. So it just thought that the test phase passed. But there was really no test that has been found because the path was wrong. So going back to the list of builds and then clicking on this first build definition, we should see build number 14 fail. You can see build number 14 has now failed, and let's check the logs. It failed in the test phase, and the reason for that is that expected is 4 but the actual was 7. So we will now fix this deficiency and push this code. And the expectation is that on the build number 20, in the build number 15, we should now be passing the test. The restore phase is quite long, yeah. Now, as we can see here that we have one test that passed out of the total of one test. So that's it. We have made our continuous integration system for build phase and test phase. The next phase I'm gonna teach you is how to connect your actual API to the test and then deploy on a server. So look out for that next video, which I'm gonna post very soon, and see you next time.